Divine justice is not vengeance, it's liberation. Today's message brings us into a deep and necessary conversation, one that many Christians and even those who have been part of the Ascended Master teachings find challenging. And yet, it is central to our role as spiritual warriors, especially in this hour. The righteous judgment of Christ and our call to wield it, not from ego, but from your inner Christ. So how do we reconcile Jesus' command, judge not lest you be judged, with our spiritual responsibility to call forth God's judgment upon injustice, evil, and darkness? And even further, what qualifies us to make such a call? And what about mercy? How do judgment and mercy balance each other? Let's begin with a verse that has caused confusion, especially in today's culture. Judge not that you be not judged. Now, many use this scripture to argue that Christians should never make judgments about anything, that love means acceptance of all things. But Jesus, in the very same gospel, also says, do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. This is an important point. Do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. Is Jesus contradicting himself? Not at all. The key lies in how and from where we judge. In Matthew 7, Jesus is warning against the hypocritical, ego-based judgment, the kind that comes from pride, resentment, anger, or self-righteousness. That kind of judgment that's not lawful and brings karmic return. With what measure you meet, it shall be measured to you again. But in John 7, he invites us into higher discernment, a judgment that is righteous, clear, and aligned with God's will. That is the kind of judgment that comes from not the human ego, but from the Christ within, your holy Christ self. In his dictation of February 25th, 1973, Jesus said, the judgments of man are not impartial, for they are incomplete. They are based not upon clear seeing, but often upon the competitive mind, emphasizing the struggles between peoples and personalities, rather than that self-competition which ever seeks to reach higher in the way of genuine spiritual service and attainment. He says the time of the threshing floor is at hand. More and more, the karmic lords are finding it necessary, even when tempering their judgments by mercy, to execute those judgments upon the ungodly which return to them their actions originating in the human consciousness that have denied mercy both to themselves and to others. These have entered into the marts of deceit, adding to the confusion of the world and holding back temporarily the blessed elements of truth, by which one day all shall be known, even as they are known. It is impossible, O beloved mankind, to deceive the jot and tittle consciousness of the great law of the universe. Inasmuch as all things were made by God, certainly our Father should be able to execute judgments wise and just, which take into account not only the evil that men do, but also the good. Let none fear, then, that the good things that he does will escape the eye of the universe unnoticed, or that the evil things that men do will not live after them. One of the great problems, he says, of the world for centuries and millenniums has been mankind's propensity toward rationalization, whereby they seek to escape from the hands of divine justice. Yet true it is that the balance of mercy and justice inherent within the law seeks ever to provide a way of escape for mankind, that they may believe that the mercies of God endure forever. There is no pleasure in the Godhead, or in the universe itself for that matter, in bringing to judgment any among mankind. That's the end of his quote. So we must never confuse human opinion with divine discernment. The only way to rightly call for the judgment is to do so from the level of your Christ self, your spiritual true identity, that is the same Christ that is in Jesus and is one with God's will. Jesus says in John 5:30, I can of myself do nothing. My judgment is righteous because I do not seek my own will, but the will of the Father who sent me. So must it be with us. When we, as light bearers and sons and daughters of God, issue a judgment call, we do not do so from wounded emotion or a desire for revenge or retaliation, or with anger or any lower vibration. We do not judge from the outer self or the personal grievance. We must stand in the presence of the Christ within, surrendered to divine will, and allow that light to shine and separate the real from the unreal, which happens first within ourselves and then in the world. Because when we call for God's judgment, it first passes through our own being. It tests our motives. It purifies our vision. It initiates us in deeper humility and spiritual clarity. So, what qualifies us to make this call? With this question, we must consider the difference between the children of God and the sons and daughters of God. Both of these descriptions are used. This is where the distinction between these two becomes important to understand. Each soul born as a child of God carries the divine spark, but not all have matured spiritually into the sons and daughters of God. You might describe the children of God as ones who are still in spiritual infancy or childhood. They are learning, growing, striving toward the light, but may still rely on outer authority and be governed by emotion, dependency, and even illusion. Sons and daughters of God, however, are those who have awakened to their true identity. They have embraced spiritual discipline. They overcome elements of their lower nature, and they have aligned themselves with divine purpose. They walk in co-creatorship with God. And indeed, if you look closely, you can see many examples of this distinction between the children of God and the sons and daughters of God in the world today. Only when you begin to walk the path of spiritual maturity, owning your divine inheritance as a son or daughter of God, do you become fit instruments to call forth Christ's judgment. This is not an entitlement. It's an earned authority granted through inner work, surrender, and obedience to divine law. Obedience to judge not, lest you be judged. Does this mean that none of the children of God call for righteous judgment? Of course not. But most would really never feel worthy to do so, or even think or believe that it would be lawful. As sons and daughters of God, we're not to remain silent in the face of evil. Jesus said, now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out. And the ruler of this world is judged. Now, isn't it interesting that Jesus spoke of the ruler of the world, but he was not speaking about himself or about his Father? He was well aware of the fallen ones that were cast out of heaven to the earth, about the evil in the world and those that embody it, or are instruments of it. In fact, he said, "Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. And that sword, the judgment that cleaves the real from the unreal." Now, can you imagine Jesus saying to the scribes and Pharisees, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye are like unto whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within full of dead men's bones and of all uncleanness." And to go even further than that, "Ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it." He clearly stated one of the primary reasons he came into the world. And Jesus said, "For judgment I am come into the world, that they which see not might see, and that they which see might be made blind." This is the calling of Christ, and we are called to join with Christ in casting down the spiritual forces of darkness through our prayers, our decrees, and our righteous stand for truth. The judgment call is given to us by Jesus is a spiritual decree, invoking the flame of divine justice to consume all that is not of the light, whether in governments, institutions, media, or in the very hidden places of the heart. But again, this is not our human will demanding punishment. This is our Christ self calling forth the divine light to expose, correct, and heal what is out of alignment with God's law, whether within ourselves or outside ourselves. And as we give that call, we must be willing to be humble and say, "Lord, begin with me. Let your judgment purify my own mind, my own heart and motives, so that I may serve you in purity." And Jesus warned that he came not to bring peace, but a sword that divides. The sword, of course, he's talking about is truth. It separates the true from the false, the real from the unreal. And when we stand with Christ in that truth, we will face opposition. And it can even come through those we love. But our role is clear. Speak the word and let God's light shine through you and do his perfect work. We call forth the light, not in pride, but in power, not in judgment of others, but in defense of truth, and always, always from the place of inner Christ authority, not the human ego. Let's look at what Jesus has to say about mercy and judgment. From the same dictation, he says, "The bounty of love is scarcely known by embodied mankind. There is a tendency for human beings to overemphasize the judgments of God as though harshness were the forte of the law, and the thunderings of the law were like tooth and fang, thunderings of vengeance. Whereas it is true that vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. That statement is also an attestation to the superior judgments of God. The judgments of men are not only careless, but they are callous, excusing themselves while condemning others for the same thing. He that is delivered from the consciousness of the spoiler understands that the preservation of life, according to divine ideals, is accomplished through the preservation of the elements of mercy, so that men will seek righteousness and pursue it diligently, knowing that thereby all mankind will find peace and security in a future of loveliness and high adventure. He says the scars upon the heart of the world are the scars upon the heart of the Divine Mother. Embodied in the maternal aspects of true motherhood are the conceptions of unfolding all life, with a mantle of spiritual aspiration. It is ever the will of the Divine Mother to see her children living not only in harmony with themselves, but also with one another and the entire universe, which holds all things, good, bad, and different. He says, when I say that it is a great misfortune that individuals seem willing to allow the cutting up of the whole into separate manifestations pitted against one another, it is to show that the way of the spoiler is a snare to the soul. How unfortunate it is that individuals can come to a place in their judgments and condemnations of others where they can justify such thoughts and feelings. They seem unwilling to allow even for ordinary dialogue between themselves and that unfortunate individual whom they have now chosen as their enemy. Is this not so prevalent today? He continues, little do people dream that in their failure to pray for their own clear seeing of the great tides of divinity within others, they are closing the door to truth, to appreciation, and to right judgment. For one day, those who refuse to hear or to consider justice and mercy in the lives of others will find that life has failed to consider it in their own. Individuals always magnetize to themselves the very qualities that they have sent out into the universe and which they have applied to others. Knowing the great, wonderful feeling of freedom that comes to all when they invoke the power of love in their life, the power of loving one another without suspicion, without fear or failure, and with that high sense of gratitude for the existence of others and the Creator that has made all. I know that individuals will come at last to feel the self-same love, which is the love of the Father and the Son, a feeling of such internal unity as is seldom understood, let alone enjoyed, by embodied mankind today. Knowing that the time of greater judgment is at hand for many, I urge upon all the development of drops of mercy and compassion for life. It is not necessary to overlook or ignore the dark doings of those who literally shatter the law of their being, their very own. Righteousness and strength, when adhered to, become the criteria of divine justice, which automatically repels injustice in others. They who are of my Father's kingdom, then, they who choose to make themselves spiritually of the house of David, of the root of Jesse, of Aaron's rod that budded, of the eternal seed, like the stars of the sky or the sands of the sea innumerable, signify their joint heirship with God. The eternal priesthood of Melchizedek will understand justice and mercy and seek to enthrone it high upon the altar of their heart and being, central to their lives and the moving direction thereof. Thus, even in moments of mankind's injustice, divine justice will blaze upon the altar of heart and soul. I, Jesus, testify unto you all that the oil of God is poured out upon the rock, that all may be and know the laws of perfection that are identical for all, and that one day will free all mankind from the darkness and turn them to the yoke of the light. Devotedly I am, Jesus the Christ. So let us remember Jesus' words as we self-evaluate. He said, "It is impossible, O beloved mankind, to conceive the jot and tittle consciousness of the great law of the universe. Inasmuch as all things were made by God, certainly the Father should be able to execute judgments, wise and just, which take into account not only the evil that men do, but also the good. Let none fear then that the good things that he does will escape the eye of the universe unnoticed, or that evil things that men do will not live after them." So let's ask ourselves a few questions. How can I judge someone to be a fallen one or an evil one when I have no knowledge of their entire span of evolution? How can I humanly know the true condition of an individual soul's evolution? We really can't. That's why we must only give the judgment call, one with the impersonal personality of the Christ. Ask yourself, can I see any good in those that I deem to be the enemy or the evil one? Am I willing to balance mercy with judgment and follow the admonishment of Jesus when he says, knowing that the time of greater judgment is at hand for many, I urge upon all the development of drops of mercy and compassion for life. I always consider what the masters have told us about the individuals who are Jesus' disciples. Only one, John the Beloved, ascended at the end of that embodiment. Others ascended after later embodiments, and some are still embodied today. But the biggest lesson we learn about not judging by appearance is in regard to Judas, the one who betrayed Jesus. The masters tell us that he was so remorseful for what he did. In his very next embodiment, he balanced his karma and made his ascension. Judas, the betrayer of Jesus. Or Paul, who was part of stoning of Saint Stephen and persecuted Christians before his conversion. Then we can consider the story of Milarepa, the Tibetan who practiced black magic against others. But after surrendering to the initiations of the guru, he made his ascension in that very same lifetime, from being a black magician to ascending in one lifetime. A testament to the ability for the soul to change, for God understanding the entire story of one's life stream, something that we cannot see from our human perspective. Now, don't get me wrong. We know that there are evil ones who will probably never bend the knee and return to God. But we also know that the masters have said, even these deep, dark, evil ones have, at the very last minute before their final judgment, can change, can make a choice to turn to God and work to balance all of their karma. And balancing mercy with judgment does not remove accountability, but it does mean that we're willing to grant the soul mercy even while a judgment is carried out, knowing that it's God's judgment, not ours. So we don't rejoice at people's problems. Look at all the human judgment going on in our political world these days. No matter your politics, do you tend to judge those on the opposite side of the spectrum? Or judge all those in leadership to be part of the evil ones? Or judge people by appearance? Or are you able to stand with Christ and speak the judgment in an impersonal way, knowing that it is a mercy of God to have the real separated from the unreal within yourself as well as others? Do you walk in the light of righteous judgment, not fearing to call for God's judgment because it's done wisely, humbly, and with a pure heart for all involved? Let us make that complete journey from spiritual childhood to divine maturity. Let us claim our mantles as sons and daughters of God and become co-workers with Christ in the healing of this world. We are not here to be passive. We're here to be powerful in the Spirit, to speak truth in love, to shine light in darkness, to call forth justice, not for punishment, but for purification and liberation. And may we always remember the words of Jesus. Do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. As I hear, he said, I judge because I seek not my own will, but the will of him who sent me. Let that be our vow too. Divine justice is not vengeance, it's liberation. Amen.